The point that is often overlooked in that conversation, and we made that point at the time, 2021, 2022, was that Akufo-Addo did not run a government for 8 years, for 4 years. He ran a government for 4 years. And in 2020, he went to seek the people's mandate. Now, if you look at the conversations of the 2020 election, in terms of the contest that occurred and what were the main issues of the contest, these ran down the economy issues were not part of the 2020 conversation. It was a part of the conversation that began in 2021, 2022, when the economy took a major hit. Now, I'll give you a few facts. For instance, if you look at the economy from the growth of Ghana's economy in 2018, surged to 8.1, 2018, 8.1 GDP. Okay, it was said to be one of the highest in the world. And then it plummeted to 0.4 in 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But some people may disagree, fair enough. The education, the government's investment in education between 2013 and 2016 was 20.7 billion Ghana cedis. Education investment, the John Mahama period, 2013 to 2016. That figure doubled between 2017 and 2020 to 40.4 billion. Now, if you look at one of the key indicators, which is inflation, for instance, or even the depreciation of the cedi, which is a very important conversation. Now, the depreciation of the cedi was 28.38% between 2017 and 2020. And that was a better performance from the previous 4 years of a 52% depreciation of the cedi, 52.65% depreciation of the cedi in 2013 to 2017. And Akufo-Addo in the ensuing 4 years went to 28.38. So clearly, as we say in football, when the game is different, a game of two halves. The Akufo-Addo administration was clearly a game of two halves. The 2021 to 2024 did not have any resemblance at all to 2017 to 2020. And there's a reason for that. Sometimes people will disagree with the reason. But he says Akufo-Addo's performance in that period was the worst in the political history of Ghana. He may say so, but he also has to recognize that Akufo-Addo's government endured the worst global catastrophe in the history of Ghana. It was Akufo-Addo's government. That was the government in charge. At the time, the worst global catastrophe never happened since the Second World War occurred across the world. Every government in the world took a major hit of this situation. So it may be true that human failings were part of it. It may be true that the optics of the NPP administration were a big part of it. It may be true. It may be true that reports of a Cecilia Dapa $1 million was a major part of it. It may be true that Akufo-Addo's published relationship with traditional authority may be a big part of it. All of that is a big part of it. But the fundamental core of the matter is that the Akufo-Addo performance of 2017 to 2020 is significantly different from the performance of 2021. That can only be explained by the pandemic. Sometime this week, I saw a news flash about President Mahama referring to the pandemic and how the pandemic had cost African countries and speaking to the United Nations and urging the United Nations to recognize that African countries had been hit harder by the pandemic than other countries. So it's a conversation that we can have. But it is when that conversation is had, whilst the blame must go on the NPP politicians, they can take a lot of blame for the NPP's defeat, division in the party, lack of unity, bad optics, appearance of corruption. All of that is a big part of the conversation. But the core issues are these, that this is a government that did not do only 4 years. It did 8 years and went into an election in 2020. And if you Google the issues for election in 2020, you will not find those inflation, the economic indicators among the issues that were fought in the 2020 election. Indeed, one of the big issues of the 2020 election for the NDC was the restoration and regulation of Okada issues. It was a major issue for the NDC in 2020's election. NDC did not win the election, and they came to another election. It was not a major part of the 2024 election because they didn't need it. NDC in 2024's election did not need to rehash the Okada situation and present it as an alternative to government because they had more than enough. They had the appearance of corruption. They had an economy that had been ravaged by COVID and the Russian-Ukraine war. They had prices that were soaring above. They had a free SHS that had opened the doors to so many people that the government infrastructure was not ready to contain it, and therefore developed a minor problem out of which the government tried to solve with a double-track system, which many parents were concerned about because it was novel. What is this double-track system? They didn't quite get it. And the government was his own enemy in this regard, because if Akufo-Addo did not set out free SHS so that many more Ghanaians who couldn't afford can now afford and have entitlement to go to schools. And we have seen the first what do you call it, the placement systems under the NDC of last 2 weeks. I think we are still in it. And we've seen what has happened. And we can remember 2-3 years ago whether we heard some of these stories. And we know that we didn't hear these stories about postings being done in a certain way. We didn't hear those stories. But now we are hearing those stories. Fair enough. We all have to support the government to succeed because it's about education. Education is not something you politicize, that they are better, we are better. Let's all help the government to succeed.
Do you then agree with, Gabi Asare-Oshidako, who is of the opinion that the apology which some MPP bigwigs are rendering to Ghanaians, for him is self-defeatist, because it creates a certain impression in the minds of Ghanaians that the Akufo-Addo government was a total failure, and that what the MPP should rather be doing is to be trumpeting more on, just like you've done, what's the achievements of the Akufo-Addo have been. But of course, he says that he doesn't have a problem if you take specific issues and say, well, on this one, we could have done better. Do you understand what I'm saying? We could have done better, and so we're sorry about that. And so he has a problem with, MPP element apologizing to Ghanaians as though Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo administration did not do anything, properly. And of course, we are told that Gabi has had to apologize to the Ashanti MPs because he told them that they preferred community roads instead of the big ticket items like the flyovers and so on and so forth, And so it's two things: the Ashanti MPs and then the general apology. But that one, we don't know whether Gabi has apologized for that. Okay, so based on everything that you've said, I'm asking what you think about, because it's actually in one of the newspapers today.
No problem. I mean,
there's a chap who is taking him on.
No, it's a topic we can. He's been taken on by many. But I thought we were going to talk also about the petitions before the president and the Japan Dami matter.
I want you to land with that. I'll bring Felix in.
And then we start on that one. Okay. So yes, I have seen the Adom-Otchere. I didn't know that he had apologized to Ashanti MPs.
Well, it was Collins Adom-Otchere
who came to say
to us.
Okay, that he has apologized. But that has not been published by.
No, it has been published. Apparently, there's the Ashanti Caucus WhatsApp group.
Well,
so
okay,
he sent an apology to that.
Well,
I don't know why
I heard it, and I think
he didn't apologize publicly, but decided to do it on Ashanti.
Well, so I don't know whether we can even deal with it, because the person who said it has not said he's apologized.
Right.
Anyway, but it's a fair issue, and it's politics. You see, and Gabi said that the apology was not for something specific. Is that what happened? Is he referring to Dr. Baumia's recent apology?
He didn't mention.
Or the earlier apologies that have been coming.
MPP elements.
Oh, MPP elements. Yes. Okay, but then when you see that, when you look at the poster they put, Dr. Baumia was recently did mention some apologies. Yes. And I do not know whether there has been an apology in such macro terms. I think it's all specific, but I don't know. But if it's not specific, then I can now deal with it.
There's actually a video where Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was apologizing generally.
Generally. So that's what he's referring to, that apologize for something specific, not general. Okay. Now, it's politics, you see. This will not be the first time that any government that has left office has been told that apologize for the wrongs that you did. Because there have even been instances where some people have been in government towards elections and they have rendered apologies for things that have been done. So it's not really new to have politics and politicians being told that this one apology works. The critical thing is that he's right in saying the MPP should sort of champion what Akufo-Addo achieved. Now, during the campaign, the MPP found themselves in a very difficult situation. And the verdict has been cast that the MPP PR machinery was terrible. They could not even promote what their government was doing. and that they had allowed Minister Felix Ofosu and Sami Jemfi to run them routes on the PR corridors of media houses. I think I have a different view, and I expressed that view to some people at the time. You see, when you are running politics, you are supposed to deliver resources to people. There's a saying that self-preservation is first for every human being. And the Bible talks about 3 needs of human beings: food, clothing, and shelter. If you have a responsibility to deliver something to people and you do not deliver it, and you are telling them, pointing something else to them, it's always very difficult. So PR people, for the purpose of election and politicking, will gather on Sunday evening and discuss what are we doing for the week. Okay, so NDC gather on Sunday evening. What are we doing for the week? In June 2024, they have so much on their plate. It's very simple. MPP gather. What are we doing for the week? They come out, okay, so we're going to say about how many people have been previous teachers has appointed, so and so and so, and they have something to say. They have quite a lot to say, because Akufo-Addo did a whole significant lot that we'll find out later, and I'll explain why we'll find out later. So MPP finished their meeting at 10 o'clock in the night. NDC finished their meeting at 10 o'clock in the night. They all go to their homes and wait for Monday morning. So NDC have deployed on Good Morning Ghana. MPP have deployed on Good Morning Ghana. Monday morning, 7:20, petrol prices have gone up. The MPP's case is dead. All the preparations they had on Sunday night is dead, practically dead. Because when I sit in my car, I'm going to work. I'm an MPP voter. I'm 27 years old. My father is MPP. My mother is MPP. My grandmother is MPP. I grew up in Ashtown. MPP is in my blood. But I'm 27 years old. I'm working for a bank. I live at Oyibi. And then I know on Friday that my weekly fuel is 500 cedis. Friday, I know that. So I've put my weekly fuel down. I'm very MPP. Then I sit in my car and National Petroleum Authority says petrol has gone up. What? What is this? What is happening? What is this? What is this MPP government doing? Akufo-Addo Kwaya Breno, this and that. Then I tune my radio, and then Felix is on Joy, and he says, Evans, have you heard that petrol prices have gone up this morning? That is what happened. That is what happened. So it will take a while for people to now see, and Akufo-Addo will not be the first person that this has happened to. It happened to Nkrumah. The events of the economic situation of the world from 1964, including Ghana's own situation, and when the coup occurred against Nkrumah and people were celebrating, it was about the price of milk, it was about the price of this, the price of that, prices have shot up. And so people always have that problem. So it's part of politics. So Akufo-Addo will not be the first. Okay. But this is the context within which MPP needed to rot a successful PR campaign. Right. It was going to be nearly impossible. And I was just telling some young people yesterday, actually, that when we go to elections and somebody wins, it's not always that they run a better campaign. From sitting where I sit, in terms of my experience as a news reporter, I can clearly tell you that the 2000 campaign that was run by Professor Mills was better than the one that was run by Akufo. Why? How is it better? Campaign coordination, how many places they visited, the information they have on the voter. It was better. Sometimes it has to be fueled by money. In those days, only government parties have money. Now we see that when there's campaign, both government and opposition have money, and I'm very excited about that. That used to be what they do in England, and we're hoping it comes to Ghana. Now it has come to Ghana. 2008, I was close to the Akufo-Addo campaign, and I believe that Akufo-Addo campaign of 2008 was a much better, sophisticated campaign than the Professor Mills one. Indeed, at the time Professor Mills had won the election, or at the time the results had gone into a second round, some of the Mills people did not even know that they didn't have the mechanism to find out that, and it was just the brevity of a few of them at the Electoral Commission, and I was there, Victor Smith, Rojo Metilnunu, Haruna Drisu, and others, who just had to showboat, and then the second round was pushed through, because the NDC did not really have anything. Right. 2016's campaign, I was observing Omani Boama and Felix and others, and it seemed obvious that they had run a much better campaign than the campaign that won, the Akufo-Addo campaign that won. So when people have won elections, it doesn't make them some superheroes that they were able to craft something significant, because those people who lose elections, they're the same people who win elections. Felix has won elections in 2024, but he lost elections in 2016. Johnson Asiedu Nkatia became the chairman of the party sometime before 2016 or so. He lost 2016 elections and lost 2020 elections. He lost 2 successive elections and won a 3rd.
Okay.
So if there have been 3 elections, he's won 1 and lost 2.
Right.
So when Gabi says that they should talk about the things Akufo-Addo is doing, that will emerge. But in the circumstances of 2024, and even in the current circumstances, where a government has done 9 months, and then you start talking about Akufo-Addo this, Akufo-Addo that. No, leave it. The government's performance and the people's assessment will be very obvious to everyone. Some of the issues have started coming up.
Okay.
If Cecilia Dapa has stolen the money, why is she still there? People are asking some of these genuine questions. Okay. And you heard the clip that you just played about Opon Nkrumah. People are asking the genuine questions. So it's all about people. It is the people that grant victory to a political party.
All right.
I don't think it's so much the political party's workings or whether you were able to run your campaign, even though you still have to do that because there's a platform that you have to process. Right. Okay. So really, Gabi is right and he may also be wrong. I don't know whether he's apologized to Ashanti MPs, but if he had done that, then that's fair.
All right. Felix.
Well, on one thing, I agree with Paul. You see, and I've said it on your program many times and everywhere I've been, that for the most part, every election is a referendum on the incumbent. When voters come to a conclusion that the incumbent has done well, it doesn't matter what campaign you wage or which candidate you bring. That is why I am amused at the way that the MPP is tickling itself and laughing and thinking that merely because they hold presidential primaries 3 years to elections, they will have some advantage over the incumbent. It won't happen. It doesn't matter what they do. When President Mahama performs well, and the people of Ghana accept that he has, the NDC will be head and shoulders above anything that the MPP presents in the elections. And that is how it has always been, at least since 1992, when I have been observing elections. Every single election held in Ghana has been decided on account of the views of the people on the performance of the government, especially regarding the economy and nothing more. We speak about corruption. It's an important matter. But since I became politically active, I have sat in presentations of political research that the NDC and other third parties have conducted. Every one of them has never had corruption as the topmost item that decides people's voting patterns. It is always the economy. Even in 2016, in fact, 2012, when Akufo-Addo and the FPP made a lot of noise about education, the dominant thing for that election was free SHS, you remember? But the economy held sway because people assessed their living conditions and accepted that the government of the day had stabilized the economy and that the economy was in much better shape than they inherited. This was a period when the economy had grown in excess of 14% in 2011. Inflation had remained a single digit for 3 years and counting, and things were stable. So no matter how much noise Akufo-Addo made about free SHS, people still voted for the economy. It was the same in 2016. Despite all, and I was at the forefront of government communication. And you saw the effort that we put into marketing what President Mahama had done. Every child in Ghana could rattle off what President Mahama had done in every sector. But the people of Ghana at the time didn't think it was sufficient, especially regarding the economy. So they gave Akufo-Addo the chance. He came in and put up a performance that was absolutely atrocious, especially regarding the economy. So there was no way the people of Ghana were going to listen to anything they said. You know, sometimes communication is overrated. That's why I gave you an analogy of Bob Marley's lyrics. He who feels it knows it. You see, we politicians, all this hoopla we engage in, all the campaigns we do, lead to the creation of a certain content that we present to the electorate. The electorate then assesses it and weighs it against their present circumstance and make a determination. If you have done well in the economy, forget about the figures that you recite. It will reflect in the lives of the people, so they will see. Why? When you took people's money, 1.3 million bondholders, when you took their money and said you were not going to pay them interest and principals and that you were going to shave off significant portions of those, what amount of PR is going to countermand that? The man has lent you money. He expects that you pay him interest at an agreed time. And then when the principal is due, you pay. You don't do that. How can you convince him that you've done well for him as far as the economy is concerned? When the businessman goes to the Forest Bureau, and a few months before then, he needed 6 cedis to purchase $1. And today, you ask him to bring 17 cedis. What kind of PR are you going to run? That will convince him otherwise. So when Paul and some in the FPP say that Akufo-Addo did this, Akufo-Addo did that, and that the performance in 2020 was good, but the performance in 2024 was bad, and so when we are assessing him, we should look at only the 2020 performance. I don't know what they are talking about. Look, they gave you 8 years. Within that period, they expected significant performance. In fact, in 2020, I have always held the view that if you look at the outcome of the elections, Ghanaians protested, except that they gave President Akufo-Addo the benefit of the doubt that perhaps 4 years is not enough to do all the things that he says he will do. So let's give him another 4 years. When they did that and found that he had grossly underperformed, they booted the MPP out in the most ignominious fashion. 1.7 million votes is the single biggest margin of defeat for any political party, at least since 1992. In fact, President Rawlings has the biggest percentage. He won by 58% in 1996, I believe. But in terms of raw numbers, President Mama has had the highest. And it was primarily because of the underperformance of the MPP. That is how Ghanaians have always assessed governments. So nobody should delude themselves that bringing a particular candidate who has been on the ballot for 4 times would do the magic. Of course, it helps that you don't have to spend much on marketing him because you don't need to do too much advertisement because people know his face. But name and face recognition won't deliver results if the people think that you have failed. Now, on Paul's repetition of the hackneyed MPP excuse about COVID. COVID was a global pandemic. If you like, call it a global catastrophe. So because of that, the effects should be global. When you do the analysis, Ghana should be part of the average. But that was not the case after 2000. In fact, the reason why the economy took a downturn began to manifest from 2019. So you look at the figures carefully. A key indicator of economic performance, management, and prudence is the deficit. Right from 2019, the deficit began to rise. No, in fact, 2018, the deficit rose higher than what they inherited. It was at that time that we started cautioning them that no, you remember President Mahamet's admonition to Akufo-Addo that the economy was beginning to heat up. They rebuffed them and said that they knew what they were about. That was when Bawumia was touting the credentials of the MPP economic management team. By 2020, things had come to a head. So we had a global pandemic. And like any other human being, when you are hit with a crisis, you adjust. Economic principles are not thrown out of the window on account of a crisis. It's an exogenous shock. But you factor it in your planning. By July of 2020, we had got a hang of COVID. Ken Ofori-Atta went to Parliament to revise the figures that he had presented to Parliament in the budget that he presented the following year. It was because he knew that COVID was going to shift the goalpost a bit. So he went to Parliament and made specific commitments. By July, COVID hadn't worsened. In fact, the worst of COVID had passed. We had even done the lockdown, if I'm not mistaken. And the lockdown was at the height of COVID. So they knew that we had this pandemic, and therefore planning needed to factor in the effects of the pandemic. In addition to this, they received tens of billions of Ghana cedis in aid. The IMF gave us $1 billion back to back between 2021 and 2022. No government has benefited from that. The first tranche was $1 billion, which at the time should have been around 12 billion cedis. It was free money. We in the NDC have not received $1 billion in free money ever from the IMF. The AFDB, World Bank, they gave you hundreds of millions of dollars. When you put it together, in excess of 23 billion Ghana cedis came into this country because of COVID. If you were managing the economy prudently, you will use this in a manner that protected the public against the spread of the pandemic, but also ensured that your finances were stable. Countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, even Nigeria were able to do this. So at the end of the pandemic, when you assess their books, you found that they were within reasonable limits. But this party, the MPP, overspent precisely because there was an election. Again, I took part in elections in 2020. So I know the kind of campaign they waged. Molo, people would be sitting there because they were MPP fanatics. They will receive monies, sometimes 5,000 cedis, 10,000 cedis, under the guise of business support when they have not even sought it. We all heard the vice chairperson of the MPP, Felix, say that because of the pandemic, MPP government sent them monies. Parliamentary candidates received 100,000. She, as a regional executive of the Northern Region, received 70,000. If you dip your hands in the public purse and share monies like confetti at the height of a pandemic, how do you expect that your economy will be sustained? Ken Ofori-Atta went to Parliament in July and said that he had previously set a deficit target of 5% in the 2020 budget. But because of the pandemic, he was going to do about 10%. Molo, he did 15%. This created a catastrophic void in our economy. So everything they did after 2021 was try to seal this hole. And the more they tried, the deeper they sank. And then when it became obvious that things had gone haywire and they needed to seek intervention, they needed to go to the IMF. They were all over the place. Ken Ofori-Atta was insisting that he won't go. Do you know how he went to the IMF? It was the governor of the Bank of Ghana who presented such a dire situation to Akufo-Addo that he didn't have a choice. He picked the phone and called the IMF managing director, that Ghana was finally going to accede to an IMF program. They should have gone to the IMF immediately after the 2020 elections. That would have given confidence to investors, who would then have had more patience with us and pulled their investment. Because they didn't do that and things were heading south, investors panicked. Moreover, the Bank of Ghana itself has published that in the space of 2 years, $6 billion left this country. When you do that, your currency will take a hit. That is how come our currency collapsed precipitously. So it was their bad economic decisions, the way they spent in 2020 as if there was no tomorrow, simply so that they carry favor with their party executives and the public. That is what led to the whole. It had nothing to do with COVID per se. COVID was a global phenomenon that nobody could dispute. And let me put it on record. I've seen Dr. Bamia, Paul has repeated this, NP propagandists are running with it, that President Obama has gone to the UN to capitulate on COVID. He hasn't done so. Indeed, the video they show is a video of President Obama at Harvard sometime in 2022 or so, in which he acknowledged the effects of COVID on all economies around the globe. But the paragraph that came right after this statement highlighted inherent mismanagement in Ghana as the reason why our situation was so dire compared to our peers in West Africa. Look, Moro, when they did the analysis, there were countries in West Africa that had debt to GDP ratios around 40% to 50%. We had 104%. They borrowed and squandered it on consumption because they thought there was an election. So what made the difference between Ghana's recklessness and the prudence of our neighbors was the election. They overspent. So they must admit that and refrain from making, indeed, they even added the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. But the Russia-Ukrainian conflict is on. It's on. Indeed, it's more likely that the Gaza-Palestinian crisis will be resolved earlier than the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. And yet, within the period that we've been in power, you've seen how we've managed this economy. The difference is prudence. You hear them shout from the rooftops that, oh, government is not spending. And sometimes they turn themselves into spokespersons for contractors. President Mahama has put in place such rigorous measures. Today, if you go to the finance minister with a proposed contract for some procurement activity, he will demand that you seek commencement certification, which means that he has to examine the prudence of that expenditure, its necessity, and the impact it will have on the economy and overall development before he approves it. And this has been established by no less a person than President Mahama himself. So he is exercising stringent oversight on government expenditure. And I've told you that we spent in excess of 100 billion already out of the 230 billion budget that we made. But the money has gone to critical sectors